The boroughs are New York City. The burbs are everywhere else. Real estate is the ultimate game of risk and reward. It's the biggest investment most people ever make. Fortunes are made over a lifetime and lost in a day. And we're not playing with monopoly money. How do you stay ahead? Who's buying? Who's selling? And why? What do they know? We want the truth. You need an edge. Boroughs and Burbs is your secret weapon, giving you the insider knowledge and strategies you need to succeed in the high-stakes world of real estate. From Palm Beach to Palm Springs, Manhattan to Malibu, we press the experts to expose the pain, find the deals, and occasionally predict the future. That's Boroughs and Burbs, Thursdays, 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific. Because everyone can make money in real estate.
Welcome, everybody. Boroughs and Burbs, number 164, Decorating Historic Homes. Today we have Joseph Marini of At Home with Joseph, and we're going to be talking about, wedding planning, decorating, restoring historic homes. Welcome, Joseph. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
My host, Roberto Cabrera. Where are you, Roberto?
I'm in Manhattan. Always happy to be here with you, my friend. Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm John Engel at Douglas Elliman, and I'm out in Connecticut. I'm the Burbs. He's the Boroughs. And you're the star today. Today, I'm going to pull us up. Let's see. I'm going to pull up Grace Farms. I want to thank our sponsor, Grace Farms. You'll find them at gracefarms.org. There's a beautiful winter shot of the river building. They've got a full calendar of events going on this winter. But if you're just in the neighborhood, swing by and have tea with Frank in the tea house. Also, it makes a great gift for the holiday season, Grace Farms teas and coffees. I'm John Engel. That's my website. You'll find me at theengelteam.com. And let's see, I think I had Meet the Team. No, there we are. And there we are, the whole team.
Look at that group.
Right? Good looking group. And everybody in their navy and white. We're all in uniform. That's the monthly newsletter. You'll find that at robertocabrera.com. This month, where do we go from here? I think we're at an inflection point post-election where everybody's wondering what's going to go on with the New York market, the New York economy. For those answers, you go to robertocabrera.com, and you know that he's bullish on 2025. This is At Home with Joseph, and that's Joseph. And he's just created a new book. We're going to ask him about the book. You can buy the book at Mastering the Art of Entertaining. There it is at Amazon. 22 ratings, all of them 5 stars. Check it out, 312 pages. We're going to talk about not only decorating historic homes, but mastering the art of entertaining and his future book. And with that, let's begin. Hello, Joseph. How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, I could just dive in with questions, but why don't you tell us, how you got started decorating historic homes?
Sure. A long time ago, I went to culinary school and opened a event design business in New York City, actually, and started doing destination weddings out in Connecticut and found that most of my business was out there. So prior to moving out to Connecticut, I restored a late 1800s townhouse in Brooklyn. I don't know if it's considered this anymore, but it was the Carroll Street Waterfront District. So just between Red Hook and Brooklyn Heights. But when I moved out to Connecticut to further my business, I started restoring old farmhouses out there. And so I sort of developed this love of old homes and entertaining. And while I was doing it professionally, then I started doing it for myself in these spaces. And that's how I got to publishing my book today.
I've been watching and the whole nation has been watching with great interest the Martha Stewart documentary on Netflix, and she pretty much tells the same story. She made $1 billion getting into the entertaining business and hooking up with the Hamptons crowd in particular. But she
I was
also,
not quite that lucky.
yeah, so I'm hopeful for you.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people, I guess, watching this show are imagining, well, there's the entertaining business where you're putting on the events, event planning, weddings. Then for her, it evolved into books. You're also published already and have more books in the works.
Yeah.
You also talked about having a store,
Yeah.
a shop.
Yeah.
And so talk to us about how these things fit together, because that's clearly a theme in the Martha Stewart universe, and she
Mhm.
talks about how all these things are complementary.
Sure. I really think that the home is sort of the foundation of our lives, no matter what age we're at, right? From birth all the way to death, our lives revolve around our home. And I think we really got a good grasp of that during COVID when people started realizing that oh my God, I'm stuck in this house and it just doesn't work for me. And now I've got to figure out ways to make this work for me because I'm here 24/7. And I think that um, finding a home, one that you connect with, restoring or renovating a home, decorating a home, and then how you actually use it, and then how you bring friends and family into it to entertain them. It's all sort of a storyline that builds as we age and mature into young adults and then middle age and more mature adults that we start venturing out into doing these things. And, a lot of the things that somebody in their 40s who has a family and does this type of entertaining, I think thinks more about a younger generation just starting out doesn't. However, I really want to inspire people from a young age to start thinking about this in a way that um, really all of your life does revolve around a home, whether you're there for 5 minutes or, 50 days. It's all about how I always feel your home is a reflection of you, and how you treat your home is also respective of almost how you treat yourself.
Okay, so this show is geared towards decorating a historic home. So I want to
Mhm.
kind of go in that direction because how can we just even basically differentiate from, you just have a regular home, but now you have this historic home. What what do we need to be concerned about? How do we initially even view that, and how do we proceed into that process?
Yeah. So in my experience, I think that there is a romanticization about buying an old home and fixing it up and living in it. And I think that if somebody has an interest in that, it's important to understand the history of the house, the intention of the house at the time when it was built, and respecting what that was. And so oftentimes, I see people wanting to go into historic homes and just blow it out and just get rid of it all. And for me, and a home is always about your own interpretation of who you are. But for me, I believe those are the elements that drew you to the beauty of the house. So just wiping them away isn't being respectful to the craftsmanship that created the house. And I think that if you're interested in restoring or decorating an old house, I really think the house will tell you what it needs, and it will sort of it will create a baseline for how you would end up living in that house, if that makes sense.
Sure. So a lot of historic houses tend to be like very, very dark. And I'm looking at a lot of this, it's very light.
Yeah.
Is that an initial intention, or is that arbitrary? I mean, can you give me some sense of just like, because when you walk in a house, just a sense of light
Yeah.
is a feeling. And a lot of, so a lot of historic houses can have little tiny windows. Talk to me about just that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think almost every home, unless it's completely wrapped in complete glass, always has light and dark areas. And when you're looking at an old home, you want to accentuate the positives of the house. And so for me, normally when I look at old homes, even if they have smaller windows, I still want to respect the architecture of that, but I want to figure out how to highlight the positive of that small window, or to draw the attention to the light that actually does come through it. Because, I've learned a lot through dealing with photographers that more light exists than we actually can see. And so we don't really take the time to notice it. And so for me, like when I'm restoring an old home, I never really change the size of the windows if I think that they look good into scale of a property. Um, but I may not ever use curtains on them because I want to keep the influx of light that comes in as much as possible. And so I also love moldings. And so I never really cover my windows with drapes, and even hanging drapes on the side of a window creates the illusion of like enclosure and darkening. And even if it's not covering the panes, it still is going to give you that illusion of darkness versus a window that's unadorned with anything. You'll notice the bright light that comes through it.
So might you use certain window treatments or curtains on a room that's like a library that's supposed to feel cozy or something like that?
Yeah, so I have always tended to opt towards roller shades because I think that they're not intrusive, they're not bulky, they're very streamlined, so they can roll up and you don't see them, and they can roll down and you can choose the shading that you want of them. They could be completely blackout, they could be a certain percentage of shading. I tend to gravitate towards that. If you are decorating a room and you do want to create the mood, so then it doesn't become about the light that's coming through the window, it becomes about the mood that you want to create in the room. And from that perspective, then I would say pick window treatments that complement your decorating. Although I personally feel that I think people are too reliant on very heavy drapes around windows and layering shades and balances and curtains. And I think when you get that real heaviness around a window, it just darkens everything. And I think sometimes paring back and having less can give you a better impression in light of the historicness and the beauty of the craftsmanship of the house.
And then what about floors? A lot of floors tend to be really dark.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I've seen people where they'll take a historic house and they'll actually like pickle the floors. So
Yeah.
kind of white or
Yeah.
washed. I mean,
Yeah.
what's the right?
I have, you know what, I want to jump in here.
Please.
I've got a 200-year-old house. I live in a house circa 1800, and the floors were a major point of discussion between me and my contractor. And I said, I want to keep the old floors. Oh, he says, I don't know. They've been sanded down many times. They're antique floors. They're soft wood. They're fir. I know you love the patina, but once we sand them down, you're going to lose that patina. You're going to lose a lot of what you love. Don't know if we're going to be able to, restore your floor. You might want to just, and so a lot of us get encouraged to just, throw in the white flag and, and put in a new floor.
Yeah.
In my case, I was able to keep the old floors. But one of the compromises you make that Roberto just alluded to is he said, you've got darker floors and they're going to have to stay that way. And I said, okay, no problem. And he said, we'll try to match it, but it won't be perfect. Okay, that's a second compromise we make with the floors.
Yeah.
So talk to us about floors, the kinds of floors. I noticed a lot of wide board floors. I noticed painted floors. So talk to us about floors.
Yeah, so I love painted floors, so I tend to do that a lot. However, I have restored some homes that I didn't do that. And I usually choose, so one of the things that I think people tend to do is listen to contractors who um, don't value the look of a home looking like it's been used, right? So it has to look pristine. And I think if you're going to buy an antique home, the beauty of that home is that it looks like it's been used for 200 years. And so sanding down those floors would really lighten them up. However, you then have to start thinking historically of how would people back 200 years ago have treated these floors. They either would have used a milk paint on them to lighten them up, which would have soaked into the wood, or they would have used a hand wax. They would not use a polyurethane or a dark stain. That didn't exist then. So they would use natural elements to then seal their floors, which gives them that age and that sort of beautiful worn look to them, without using any of our newer products that make everything look pristine. But I do believe that, you know, that's sort of the beauty of an old home, is that you're sort of adopting what's there, and that's why you love it. If you are stuck with dark floors, then consider lightening that up with lighter colored rugs. And that could be even from, you know, if you have sort of a natural aesthetic, it could be a white sisal up to a white wool rug. But you can lighten up a room, and you can take away that density of the floor by using elements to counterbalance that, right? And even if you have dark floors, even your furniture that you put on the floors, if you go lighter with them, you're going to take the focus away from the floors, and it's actually going to somewhat complement what you have. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people, they like the dark floors, they like dark furniture, they like this, but they don't look at it in a cohesive unit to make their decisions. And so they piecemeal their decisions, and then they don't end up liking the end result because they didn't think of it in a full picture scale.
What's the most commonly used wood in these old homes for the floors? Is it oak?
It really depends on where the home is. So if you're going into rural America, or, you know, old farmhouses typically were made of pine.
Mm.
It was common to see chestnut a lot. It really depends on the trees that were around in that geographical area. If you're in sort of an urban setting like Manhattan or Philadelphia or you know, Baltimore, and you've got these sort of larger, grander homes, you tend to find oak in them because people could afford that. But also in the same home, you might go to the second floor and you might then see pine floors because they put all of the money into the display of the first floor where they welcomed their guests.
Right. Right. And then
I want to talk.
Go ahead, please, John.
I want to talk about shades some more. I want to go back to shades.
Okay.
I found some pictures of shades.
Yeah.
You talked about roller shades, and these are roller shades. And I think with technology and smart homes, we're starting to see a lot more automated roller shades where they automatically come down and black out and automatically open up. And that's been a really exciting feature. Does that mean that we're all moving toward, as you put it, the more architectural look of roller shades? And you see an example here with sheer and both blackout. You see it with and without drapes. An alternative is the old Roman shade, not a roller at all. That's rather old fashioned, but I would consider that more arts and crafts and maybe more appropriate to a 200-year-old house. Balloon shades, right? That gets us into way too traditional. Nobody's doing
Very
balloon
Victorian.
shades anymore, right?
Right.
Or are they, to try to restore, in a sense of a restoration of a home, like to make it look a certain way?
Yeah, well, I really think it depends on the intent of the person.
'Cause you look behind Roberto and you see the guy needs shades, right? What's Roberto gonna do? So let's help Roberto here. Roman, roller, shears.
They're electric shades.
Yes,
Are they?
I would say 100% roller shades for them. I think that the idea of a roller shade is that it gives you an element of a modern feeling in an old home without completely taking out all of the architectural elements. And I think that they're so unobtrusive that it actually lets you see all of the detail around the window without covering anything up. So in my opinion, I think almost in any architectural style, they actually work for almost everything. And that's why I like them, because I think it gives a little bit of a clean, modern touch to, you know, the heavy moldings and and you get to see the craftsmanship of everything.
Is the actual practical manual aspect of doing it part of
No, I love the electric roll-ups.
Okay. Just curious. I was curious.
Yeah. No, I think it goes down to affordability and somebody's budget. And I think
Yeah.
if you can afford to have them automated and electrified and you use a remote to control them, the less things that you see hanging in a window, even cords from a lamp, right? I wish we didn't have those anymore. The less that you see that's sort of interfering with the beauty of the window, the better. But if you can't afford them, then yes, the pull string is a perfectly fine alternative.
That's a great question. The cords for lamps and things like that, is there a fix to that, or is that just it's part of what you've created? So there's going to be a cord from the lamp that runs over there and you can see it, or do you try to disguise it under the carpet? Do you tape it down? What is the right thing to do there?
It's interesting. I've always been a proponent of hiding them as best as possible. So whether you're placing an element of, an architectural element or a column or something to physically disguise it, but then that gets difficult because you're disguising almost everything. So one of the things in living in France that I've discovered in looking through all these various homes is that they actually let their cords be displayed because they're braided fabric cords. And so then that becomes a beautiful element of the lamp. And so unfortunately, I think we're in an age where everything is plastic, and so that doesn't look pretty. But I think if you have an ability to have the cording changed out on the lamp to something that's braided and corded, it could be a statement piece. Maybe it's a red cord on a marble lamp, or it could be very subdued. It's, gold or black. But in that instance, I would say let the cord show because it's a beautiful piece to the lamp, versus a plastic one coming out. And to that end, one of the things that I think is a pet peeve of mine is seeing, 16 plugs into one plug, whether it's a 6-hopper or a power strip or whatever. And I always encourage people to think about spread that out so you're not seeing that, right? Because when you do that, at least for my eye, I gravitate to that. I see that.
Yeah.
Well, so my solution for a lot of the cords and switches is I've got smart bulbs throughout the house.
Yeah.
And so I'm not relying on going to the lamp, each lamp, and turning on 50 lights and turning off 50 lights. And with an antique house, it's often not an option to put in a modern technology Lutron system, for example. So I found for the lamps, I've got hue bulbs, and I've probably got 30 of them around the house.
Yep.
And when I go to bed at night, automatically they all turn off.
Yep.
And in the morning, they all turn back on. And they turn on with warmth if I wanted to. So if
Yep.
I want warm light at 7 a.m. and I want dim light maybe even at 7 p.m., that's the kind of light. And maybe I want 100% intensity, at noon. So I think one of the exciting things is that we can retrofit antique homes with some of this modern technology. In this case, a hue bulb or a smart bulb.
Yeah.
In other cases, when I don't have the option of a hue bulb, I might have a smart switch. And that also hangs off of the smart home and just turns on the outlet or turns it off.
Yeah.
So I'm finding that that's, an option in the 200-year-old home.
It is. It's a great one. And I think technology is starting to come up to speed with that, which is fantastic. I also think that, when you live in an old home, your plugs are predetermined where they are. And unfortunately, unless you're going to start doing rewiring, that's what you have to live with. But, now we have technology of really good lamp companies coming up with very slimline floor lamps that are rechargeable, battery operated, that you can place these and move them as needed around a room wherever you're entertaining. You could put a collection of these lamps to brighten it up where you normally would not have any light. And when you are entertaining in a home, 30% of your event is how you light it. right? And so it's all about having good lighting. And when you do have a historic home, these are great options to use.
Yeah, I have a collection of those. It's true. When I go out to a restaurant and they can bring a light to the table, right,
Yeah.
and not worry about cords, and just turn it on and light just my food. I was
Yeah.
like, my wife's like, I want this.
We
Well,
need
so
that,
now
yeah.
we've got 2 or 3 of those, and we move them around just like we're some fancy restaurant
That's right.
at my house.
Yeah. And so, the downside is that you have to keep charging them, but it does create a convenience, and it does give you, it is a solution for some of those idiosyncrasies of what you have in an old home.
So can we move to furniture?
Sure.
So one of the one of the things I always love seeing is these old French apartments or homes, and they've got some mid-century modern furniture in it and things like that. I love that juxtaposition. I think it's amazing. But in this situation where we're restoring like a home or a house, does that translate the same, or do we need to be looking at things that are, I don't know, something different?
I think it can translate. Again, I think it goes back to somebody's personal interest in different decades of design of furniture, and I think that there's a way to um, uh, very skillfully combine those to create a good look. Although I think that that takes a very detailed skill set by somebody to be able to do it. It's a difficult thing to do, and I find that most people that I've dealt with, their number one problem is figuring out furnishings. And I always tell them, because I think most people do this, they buy furniture that is too large for a room. Because normally so typically people will go out and buy room sets at a furniture showroom. And in the showroom, it's, 50,000 square feet, and this set looks like a good size. However, you're not thinking about the scale of your room, about the height of your ceilings. And so all of that sort of dictates what scale of furniture you should be buying. And, for a lot of these older antique homes, if they're smaller ones, like a farmhouse or whatever, sometimes those mid-century modern pieces work really well in them because they were smaller. They weren't built the way furniture is today, with massive arms and massive backs. And so it actually can tend to accentuate the room even more because it shows off the room versus this imposing piece of furniture that you can't get your eyes off of. Yeah, so I think that it's a good blend of having different decades of furnishings in a space. But I also think it's very important to change up the scale and the size of the furnishings that are in a room. So it shouldn't be all big, oversized, stuffed furniture. There should be, more linear pieces and more streamlined pieces and smaller chairs. And, I always think of decorating a home as creating vignettes. And so within a room, you're creating these vignettes, and the vignettes should make sense. In scale and proportion and in color and even in style to some degree.
Multiple vignettes within a room.
Yeah, that's how I decorate a room. I always look at I don't look at the room like in totality, even though I do in the end result. I look at areas that I can create vignettes in. And sometimes that just comes naturally through living in a home and figuring out how you use it. And that's really what creates the soul of a home, is not just putting in furniture and it's one and done, but living in a home and realizing this is how I use this. And it's okay to change that stuff and add and take away. It's a home is like, I go back to, it's a reflection of us. We don't buy a set wardrobe and keep that for the rest of our lives. We change, our styles change, our bodies change, and we buy what fits us. And the home is really the same thing.
So growing up in New York City in a small apartment in Stuyvesant Town, not a stylish place to live. But I grew up in the 70s, and my parents found a Mies van der Rohe Barcelona table, and that was in the living room. And that worked. And there were a couple of Corbu LC1 chairs, and that worked. And the shag rug, right? The shag rug was in the 70s. The Barcelona table works 50 years later. The LC1 chairs, they work. Nice small chairs, chrome, colorless. So you could build a room around a couple of favorite pieces back in the 70s. 50 years later, those same pieces are being brought out and reused, and yet we bring in other elements to add color, a splash of color, or not. We replace the shag rug with an Oriental. You see through the glass table at the Oriental. Then Orientals, I guess, are out of fashion now for the most part. They were in 20 years ago. They're now back out. Maybe they'll come back. We can look through our glass tables at the Orientals. So my question is, do you start with one or two fabulous pieces and build around that? I would imagine you don't get to start very often with a blank slate. If you do start with a blank slate, it's the home, where it's an empty home and you have to start, but you have to take into effect the moldings, the windows, the architecture of the home, the floors. But sometimes the people drag a few maybe sentimental pieces, or maybe a few fabulous pieces, and you have to build a room around those pieces. Talk to us about how the process works.
Yeah, sure. So again, it depends on the piece. Me personally, I start with the room with deciding first how I want the room to feel, and second, that's going to sort of dictate what color I want to paint the room. And then I will typically build around that. And even if I've got some pieces that I have, I try to fit those pieces into that room. So I go about it a little bit differently than starting with a piece of furniture, because again, you're talking about a stylistic thing. And so 10 years from now, you might want to get rid of that again, but now you've built this room around it. Just like a wardrobe, you don't build it around the belt. The belt is just the accessory. And so when I do have things that I want to use, I do think about the room and the color and the design, but ultimately I want the room to feel a certain way, and I will start with the color of the room and I will build around that. And if my pieces work, I'll add them. And if they don't, I'll continue to save them. But I guess if there is a piece that you really do want to use in a room, I always try to tell people, don't get specific about that piece of furniture. In other words, people look at that piece of furniture and they try to match the color and this palette and do curtains in the green and, you know, the rug in the blue and the walls in the yellow. And you're just getting too specific on that particular piece of furniture. And I never think building a room really happens successfully that way. So if that is your statement piece, think about the room in that terms of, that's the piece I want people to see. And so sometimes paring down the room and making the room less so that that piece shines is a better approach.
But you have to have people. What if John came to you and said, I have this Jean Royer couch that I want to put in, this is, I've been to storage, I'm dying to use this, we're putting it in the living room.
Yeah.
How do you manage, John? Not easy first.
I don't believe that. Truthfully, so, you know, one of the things that I tend to do a lot is, let's put that piece of furniture in the room, even if the room isn't done. Put that piece of furniture in the room so you can visualize what this room could look and feel like. And I would design around that to be very natural and neutral, so that it's that sofa piece that becomes the piece of artwork in the room and not part of the room, if that makes sense. You want that to stand out. So you're almost treating it like it's a piece of art. And so create the room so that that is what you see, not the room and the couch and the mirrors and the chandeliers. Make that the piece, and so pare down the room, stay neutral.
I think it's easy for you to say that. Look at Roberto's background and look at my background. Roberto is giving you a pared down, right, clean palette grays. Have you looked behind me? There's clocks, there's boats, there's trucks, there's books, there's posters. It's from every, so I would imagine that a lot of your clients come with a lot of baggage.
They do, and so do I. I have a ton of my own.
So, I mean, and now we've added the additional baggage of a historic home. One of the questions we thought about before the show was, do you choose the furnishings and decor to complement the period of the home? I mean, if I'm starting with a 1930s home, do you say, oh, yep, we've got to work with 1930s, or oh no, this is Art Nouveau, Art Deco, this is 19th century. I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of baggage.
It is, and I don't think you have to be that strict in sort of following that era of 1930s when furnishing your home. I think, again, the home is sort of the envelope, and what you do inside should accentuate what the home is. And so, by that, I mean, we just purchased a 1950s Florida ranch. And what drew me to it was that the outside looks like a home that you would find in the south of France. So that was the first thing that, most Florida ranches that were built in the 50s they're not very good looking. So I liked the style that it felt like the south of France to me. And then when we walked in the home, it was vaulted ceilings that are originally vaulted. So I liked that. But it was wide open spaces. And I knew that I wanted to give it sort of a French flair. And so I've gone in that direction with the home. And there's nothing that's 1950s in my home that would say Florida. So, floral patterns and palm trees and all that. That's one decorating avenue, which would be 1950s Florida. But I wanted this to feel like the south of France. But again, when you're thinking of a room design, the execution, you have to continue to follow that.
You can't go halfway. There's no halfway.
No. And so I have an arts and crafts piece of furniture. However, that just doesn't work in my Southern French inspired interior. So I just don't use it right now. I get it.
We can't be held hostage by some of the pieces, some of the collection,
right.
some of the clutter in our lives.
Exactly.
We've got to be willing to give some up to get something new.
Right. And that doesn't mean you necessarily, if it's a prized piece, that you have to get rid of it. But you may just have to save it for a different application. And
so what are you doing in that house to make it Southern France? Like what are the broad strokes?
What are the tricks? Come on, give us the tricks.
Okay, so when I bought the house, it's originally hardwood parquet floors, which were very pretty and almost reminded me of floors that you would see in Paris, right? In flats in Paris. But then I have other pieces of furniture that have wood elements. So I tend to mix modern and antique furniture together. And so I have a modern marble table with these wood caned chairs, but those wood caned chairs against that wood floor just like fell flat. And every time I looked at it, I thought, it's too much wood, it's too much wood, it's too much wood. But I wanted to keep the chairs. So I painted the floors a light gray. And it completely opened up the space. It modernized it. It made it brighter. But it also gave a little more age to the house that wouldn't necessarily be 1950s. And now when you walk in, you actually see these wood caned chairs around a marble dining room table. So you see it.
I got to stop you. Too easy. You walked in, you said, I had high ceilings. I had an open plan, high ceilings, open plan, great moldings, and parquet floors. I'm in the business of selling real estate that doesn't always come with these fabulous
Sure.
attributes.
Yeah.
Some of my clients say, I want this location and this is all I can afford. And we buy something that's, I'm going to be kind architecturally indifferent.
Okay.
And then they say, can I take this antique with its bitsy little rooms and open up the floor plan? Can I make something fabulous out of something challenging? So
Mhm.
talk to me about that, because I'm finding in this challenging market with too little inventory, and that's a national phenomenon,
Mhm.
that people are having to and rising prices. People are having to compromise. They're not able to go buy your 1950s lofty parquet floors, something, they're making far more compromises.
Mhm.
So let's talk about that. Can we, through decorating and design, really add value to something that doesn't have these? It's built in the 70s, maybe,
Sure.
and it's just quite ordinary to
Yeah.
start.
I think you can do a lot of that through decorating. And I think that when you're walking into a property like this, you want to recognize the parts of it that are good. And the parts of it that are good is what you do want to accentuate through your decorating, right? So maybe the house is just sucks through and through. However, there's this amazing picture window in this one room. You want to focus and make that your vantage point, your focal point, so that that is what you're giving your attention to every time you walk in that house, not everything else that you hate. And through the use of, paint and fabrics and furnishings, I think that you can always make something look really beautiful, even if you don't have good quality stylistic things to work with. Again, I think it goes back to sitting down and thinking about rooms in their totality versus piecemeal this, and this. And then you get something that, when you write a book, when you write the next chapter, you think about what happened in the chapter before. You don't just write these chapters and hope they come together. And decorating a room is the same way. So find what is good about the house and utilize that to your advantage. And then when you do have the budget, find the worst parts of the house and start with changing that.
I get you. I think my parents back in the 70s found a place for 20, a place in East Hampton for $25,000. They wanted that location. There was nothing redeeming about that house, nothing architecturally. And I think you're right. I think they just had fun with a paintbrush
Yeah.
and painted and fabriced the walls.
Yeah.
And they didn't have two nickels to rub together. So they would rummage, tag sales and try and find interesting architecture and interesting, I guess, accents in order to draw your eye away from a fundamentally plain cottage.
Yeah. And I think too, there's ways that you can accentuate parts of a house. So for instance, if this house just has, a 1x3 piece of molding around every door and every window, you don't have to rip that off. You can go and you can get a bullnose trim to trim around that window and build that molding out to give it a little bit more of an architectural feature. And there's lots of little things that you could add like that, that don't cost a lot of money but could make a big impact in that type of a situation.
What about art? Art. I mean, like, for example, I think a Picasso could go anywhere as long as you have really good locks on your apartment.
Mhm.
And I show some really expensive apartments sometimes here, and you'll see the art. You're like, the art is way more expensive than this outrageously expensive apartment.
And everything, yeah.
But can you? I mean, how do you choose art? I guess it just depends upon some of the choices you've made. But again, like I say, like a Picasso, I think could go anywhere.
Yeah. Again, I think it goes back to what style really affects and influences you. For me, I love oil paintings. There are people that love black and white photography. I personally don't like photography on a wall in my house. I like hand painted art because it gives that sense of sort of age to it. Whereas if I want a more modern approach, photography would fill that. And I again, I think you can blend all of that together. That takes a really skilled eye to do because it's about the execution of it. But I think art's always a very visceral thing, and I think that um, it's always really good, I think, even for young people to invest in art to whatever their budget could allow. But I think that you have to, again, think about things that speak to you and utilize them in a way that accentuate a room. And by that, I mean, I guess like you could walk into somebody's home and it could have this beautiful piece of artwork on this massive wall, and the scale of that piece of art is just too small for it. But if you picked two more pieces and stacked it or did it horizontally, you create a whole different look with that. And so it's about thinking again about the interpretation of that piece of art in the room. Now, when you have something like a Picasso, I mean, that could stand alone on itself, but
The only thing in the room.
exactly. And I also think art can be utilized differently. It doesn't always have to be hung on a wall. You could put it on an easel. If you have an antique chair, and you have a smaller sizable piece of artwork, you could actually prop that up on the wooden armchair to act like an easel and put a reading lamp over it. And so there's different ways to display art that I think doesn't necessarily just have to be flat against a wall.
Roberto, I think it'd be interesting for me to ask you the question. I mean, if we're talking about antiques and restoring, and it's a part of the market where traditionally, I think you've said in New York and certainly out here in the suburbs, people are looking at antiques to get greater value, right? To buy new construction, you're paying a premium. And a lot of times, people who can't afford today's prices are looking for value in the antiques. Where do you see that market going? Do you see customers now saying, you know what, it's too hard to do to restore. I'm not taking on a project like this. I'm not going to take on the antique. Or are you seeing the market move back toward in this direction where people are willing to take on the projects and create value, as Joseph's been talking about?
You're talking about with like an apartment that needs renovation, like an old pre-war apartment, versus buying something in a modern building that's finished.
Yeah, or out in the Hamptons or anywhere. Are you seeing there that through necessity or any other reason, people are starting to consider taking on these projects again?
I think it's all economics. I mean, I think people love pre-war. They love to restore, what it originally was and what it is. But it's a matter of economics. If the price is right, they'll do it. But I mean, a lot of times, you take on a project like that, it gets really quite expensive because you have to live somewhere while you've already purchased and you're renovating somewhere. You're carrying two properties for some long period of time. And there's
a lot where I'm going to see the bargains. If I come to you and say, I need a place or my daughter needs a place in the city, have you got any screaming good deals? You're going to point me at the projects, aren't you?
Well, I'm gonna say, do you have an appetite to do work, and do you have the time to do work, and do you have the patience to do work? I mean, that's the question, really, because I think everybody. I mean, all these apartments that are on Park Avenue and things like that, they're extraordinary, but they're also not made for the way we live today. Like you go into a modern building now, a new construction, and you just go into the bathroom, and it's there's his and hers, and there's a tub and a sink and two sinks, and I mean it's a place where you spend time. Here on these pre-war apartments, the apartments have tremendous proportion, but you're in the primary bedroom and you go into the bathroom, it's a toilet, a sink, and a tub. It's a hard, and those buildings don't have.
If you say the deal is in the Park Avenue place, and
it needs work.
So I get versus the downtown lofts with the high ceilings and the fabulous windows, and you say, but you can get a really good deal on Park Avenue. I guess the calculus I'm doing is, can I hire a Joseph? Can I get can I get help and make this fussy, old-fashioned, traditional apartment? Can I make it cool and hip?
Of course you can. It's just going to cost you.
Right.
Is it going to cost me, Joseph, or are there tricks I can do where it doesn't necessarily I don't have to spend up on the materials, right? I can do this with great color and great style. Doesn't have to cost a lot.
Sure. I think that you can definitely decorate your way around it. But I think to Roberto's point, you have to be willing to accept living in that type of a space. So you have to be willing to accept that it's a small bathroom, and I'm going to accept that I have to live with this small bathroom. Now, in that realization, what is it that I can do to make it the best small bathroom in the world, that I want to stay in there and be in there, you know? And so, okay, small, make it cozier. So maybe you're using a grass cloth wallpaper to put on it to make it even more cozier. You know, maybe you're hanging lots of little pieces of artwork to make it an art wall gallery. You know, there are ways to decorate around that to make it the best space possible until you can afford to then go in and renovate it to what you want it to be. And I think you guys would agree, therein lies sort of the benefit of buying real estate, whether it's this cheap thing or this most expensive thing, is that in holding that as an asset, it just keeps appreciating. So, you know, if you've got to wait 3 or 4 years till you have a budget to redo it, you're not losing money in that asset in normal circumstances. It's appreciating for you. So you're still building value for even buying that piece of property.
In the last, and I'll give you a real example. In the last 30 days, I've put 2 houses out there at the $1 million level in a market where the median house is $2 million. So these are 4-bedroom colonials. And in both cases, I'm going to say this past weekend, 43 couples, 43 groups came through and 7 made offers, almost all of them over asking price. So when I say, are people looking first at a location and saying, what do I have to do to get the location I want, the neighborhood I want? And am I willing to take the house that has not been renovated in 30, 40 years and take on the project, and take maybe a professional like yourself and say, can we make this fabulous? Because this is my ticket into
Sure.
the neighborhood I want.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm starting to see people taking on that willingness and willing to live through the project, as Roberto says, hire the professional, give them more latitude, meaning you don't have to work with my stuff. I'll sell my stuff on eBay, and we can start and do this, start fresh and do this properly.
Yeah.
I do think the eBay phenomenon has changed the equation, meaning I think for a very long time, you know, we had to go pick through shops, and by making everything accessible to me, so if I need a piece, I can either use Facebook Marketplace to find something local, or
Yeah.
I can find an accent piece anywhere in the world and have it shipped to me.
Yeah.
So if I need a Tiffany lamp, I can find a Tiffany lamp,
Yeah.
you know, within the day. And
Yep.
that is a new thing, I think, changing decorating, changing the calculus of how hard is it going to be to put it together. Are you finding that you're shopping online more than ever to finish a project?
Yeah. I use Facebook Marketplace, also eBay and First Dibs, a lot. So I don't spend a lot of time going through antique shops anymore. However, I do go to a lot of estate sales, and I think that is one thing that a lot of people don't utilize. It's a great source for finding really good quality stuff at decent prices. but yeah, I mean, who has the time to drive around anymore? You know, back in the day when it was just antique shops, you would build relationships with them and you would say to them, I'm looking for this kind of a piece. And that was what they did. They went hunting for you or designers, and when they found it, they would call you, right? But today we have an online resource, which I'm all about utilizing technology to make life more efficient for sure.
Well, this has been a really great show. You did mention France, and I got to say, if you like real estate as much as we do, you got to tell all your friends about Boroughs and Burbs. We did a show on Paris. We've done the show on London. We've done the show on Marbella. We've done the show on Oslo. We just did Dubai.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a hip place to start decorating, come check out Boroughs and Burbs. Give us a thumbs up. Tell all your friends, and support the channel. Thank you so much for a really interesting hour.
Thank you so much. Really
Thank you. I appreciate it.
This has been really great. And good luck on the France project.
Thank you.
Good luck on the new book. And I'll pull it one more time and you can say a few words. I'll pull it up on the screen. Where is that book? There it is. Mastering the Art of Entertaining. Came out last year.
Yep.
Should I buy this book?
You should buy it. Yes.
Okay.
It's filled with lots of good tips about how to get your home ready, from decorating to organizing for hosting large and small events at your home. It has lots of tips about how to be a successful host. And it also has almost 100 recipes of recipes that I used to use in my catering and event design business that have always been very successful when hosting parties. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Mastering the Art of Entertaining. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for having me, you guys.
Okay. We'll see you again soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.